Good evening, everyone. Please be seated. Thank you, everyone, for braving this Narnian winter we have found ourselves in March. I call on Secretary to read the minutes of our last meeting.
Propose the minutes be taken as read.
Seconded. If you propose and seconded that the minutes of the last meeting be taken as read, is this your will?
Aye.
Is it further your will that I sign these minutes as a true and accurate representation of our last meeting?
Aye.
Are there any questions of officers? Any private business? Very well. There being none, we'll move on to the primary reason for our meeting here tonight, which is to be addressed by Mr. Daniel Bowman. Daniel is one of the UK's most prominent mental health campaigners and is the Mental Health Director of Parliament Street, and has appeared numerous times across the likes of Sky News and ITV to discuss this topic, and he will address us tonight on the topic of mental health and modern day approach. So without further ado,
I want to start by obviously thanking the Durham Union and all of you for what is evidently an extremely cold and snowy evening. Even for me as a northerner, this is really, really cold. I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Director of Mental Health at Parliament Street. Through my work at Parliament Street, I've co-authored 2 papers, one on mental health and the social media society, as well as a 21st century approach to mental health, which I will allude to throughout my talk. I've also done a podcast series on mental health primarily with people who are obviously of interest, people such as Alistair Campbell, Patrick Kennedy, one of the Kennedys in America, Maureen Watts, and also leading psychologists and psychiatrists in the field. But one of my main aims is to look at the burden of mental health within contemporary society and how we really understand this and the detrimental effect it has on individuals' life chances and the finances of the country, even the economics of mental health. But also I've been on the ground as well. I'm a mental health trainer for Altrust, which is a social enterprise, and we help support teachers in schools, which is obviously a major issue, and as well as universities, help them implement support available to support pupils, students, friends, and so on. And this work's hugely rewarding. One of my greatest achievements to myself was creating the Bowman Foundation, which really, the epitome of the Bowman Foundation is a new approach to mental health. So try to understand mental health beyond the past and have to try to understand it in a current climate, things such as alluding to stuff such as social media and other stuff like that, as well, finally, as being a vice chair of a national eating disorders charity. I mean, this work is hugely rewarding and very timely. I know that mental illness is a massive issue, and tonight I'm going to allude to some of the key research we've done, which is very interesting. And since I'm in a university, I guess I better start with education. Mental health obviously is one of the biggest issues facing children and young people. I don't think anybody would doubt that within modern society. In the education system, I'm already seeing through my work the detrimental effect mental health is having on young people, and especially adolescents. And it's having a detrimental effect on their studies, but it's also having a detrimental effect on the teachers as well. I talked to one teacher who said to me, "I love teaching all of my pupils, but I worry some of my pupils who have mental health problems won't achieve 5 good GCSEs." And she's finished with, "I don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to help them." And the desperation I could see in the teacher's face showed the true, steep climb we've got to take in supporting young people and their mental health. And she alluded to the fact that actually these young people were intelligent and bright and, could achieve great things, but their mental health and the lack of provision within the schooling environment meant that actually they were getting C's and D's when they should be getting, or were predicted, A stars and A's. And the figures I'm going to allude to show a narrative that should concern all of us, clearly showing the effects of negative mental health on children and young people's life chances and a shot at education. The fact that 1 in 2 permanently excluded pupils have a recognised mental health problem, particularly concerning when 99% of all pupils who have a mental health problem end up not achieving at least 5 good GCSEs. That's 99% of pupils who have a severe mental health problem are not achieving 5 good GCSEs. But even beyond the early educational experience, we are seeing the uncomfortable figures come out. The fact that within the last year alone, in one university in the United Kingdom, there was 8 suicides. 8. How can we accept that as a society? That university was Bristol University. And even then, if it's not as severe as that, university dropouts due to mental health problems are up 210% since 2009-2010. And the research we did this year at Parliament Street for the first term of the university academic year, this term, showed that 20,237 students were trying to access mental health support between September and December. 20,000 were trying to access mental health support in the school. And only 30% of them could actually access the support within a month. 30%, only 30%. And shockingly, and probably most shockingly, at one university, there was 3,206 students trying to access mental health provision on campus, and that university was Lincoln. And the average number of 350 students a term in Britain trying to access support. And through our research, we've spoken a lot to teachers and pupils alike, and even lecturers and university students. And they always say the same thing to me. They say, surely we can do better than this. Surely in a modern society, in a Western world society, the fact that 8 students in 1 year are committing suicide, 8 in one university alone, the fact that 20,000 students are trying to get help. So, what are the solutions? I know many of you are aware, depending on your political affiliation, the government has just released a green paper on transforming young people's mental health. And to give Jeremy Hunt a little bit of praise, and that's hence why I say about political affiliation, because he definitely doesn't get very much, this paper gave a possible solution to supporting pupils and looked slightly deeper into the issue around schools. But when you actually look at the small print of this paper, the fact that, yes, there's going to be £300 million investment in schools to help leads in schools, support pupils, the small print, it will take to the academic year 2022-2023 before it's implemented in only a fifth of schools. By 2031-2032, it will be implemented in all schools. But that's 10 years, over 10 years away. And the question I ask is, what about the pupils now? What about the pupils in 5 years or 10 years when they actually need support? And I think of the loss of life chances, the chances of children and young people who are not going to be, whichever side you look at it, are not going to be able to contribute to the economy, or are simply just going to lose the chance at being part of that economy, or being part of education. So there's an economic cost as well as a social cost. And at Parliament Street, like I alluded to, we've spoken to teachers and pupils about this, because I think actually to really understand the issue, you need to go right to the floor and actually really listen to what people are saying on the ground. And we came up with the idea of mental health school partnerships. I'm probably really dating myself now because I'm talking about sports partnerships, but schools used to have sports partnerships in which look to improve the physical health of children. And why can't we have mental health partnerships? And I believe, rather unpopular view, of actually we need to work beyond the public sector. We need to work with schools, local charities, social enterprises, and the private sector in providing this provision in school. And this is where the mental health partnerships come in. They will jointly support school-aged pupils to allow them to actually get better support for their mental health without relying too much on teachers to actually provide that support, but giving different organisations such as local charities, local NHS trusts, and local social enterprises the chance to come into schools and provide that vision. And the good thing about this is it's cost effective. We wouldn't need to hire any more staff. It's a very cheap approach to actually improving the provision for young people. But also one of the biggest issues with mental health is the communication between different organisations. So what we have now is we have a child will come into the NHS and the school will know nothing about it. No information will be passed between the two. What we're saying is actually through this approach of mental health school partnerships, we could have the NHS talking to schools, schools talking to the NHS, so they're not working in silos. And through this, with government's arrangements in place to share essential information about children and young people's mental health, things would start to hopefully change. And I want it to be very clear that this is about mental health education as well. I want the next generation to be educated on mental health. I want them to know how to support their family member, their friend, or a colleague. And one of the key initiatives of mental health school partnerships is through that education. And actually allowing people from the age of year 6 to understand how to handle their mental health, to understand how to look after their well-being. And not just look after their well-being, but look after others as well. And I believe through this, it would make a drastic difference to the current picture we are seeing with young people who suffer mental health problems in the education system. And the thing is, this is not just about getting rid of stigma, but recognising that mental health is part of our society and that it is everybody's responsibility to actually play a part in helping people with mental health problems and helping their own mental health too. It's the part of businesses, the NHS, individuals themselves taking responsibility for their mental health. But I know myself, and through the experience of others, I've spoken to through my research, that it's not just education that is an issue. The reason some would argue that we're having such a problem in the educational sector with mental health is due to the lack of provision in the NHS. And because of the lack of provision in the NHS, it could be argued that people are getting increasingly worse. And to the figures that I will allude to later, you will see how that is happening. But I want to talk about a story. I met a girl at a mental health conference, and I didn't know this girl very well, and I was talking to her. And she told me that she was on a waiting list for 2 years for any mental health provision. 2 years. And when she tried to access support, they pretty much told her, go away, we'll give you some medication, everything will be fine. And within them 2 years, she actually tried to take her life twice. Tried to take her life twice. And still the help didn't come. There was a mental health professional who saw her in A&E, made sure she was okay. They tried to set up an appointment, but yet again she was on another waiting list because there wasn't the appointment available. And she also told me how her parents got so desperate they ended up paying £400 a session at a private, I think it's called the Priory Group, at a private psychology institution. And And although she is now well, she described how she felt let down by the NHS, let down by what was available. And her words alone, I just want to read these. "I was close to death, but not the stereotypical type of way. I didn't have a physical health condition. And I didn't understand why I couldn't access the same support. I was actually trying to take things into my own hands so I could actually access that support." So she was pretty much saying, if I actually try to hurt myself, or if I actually try to take it into my own hands, I'll be more likely to get the support from the NHS. And sadly, that is replicated across everyone we talk to. They truly believed that actually the support wasn't available, and the only way to get that support was either pay private, or wait in a long waiting list, or actually try to take things into their own hands. And, you know, these stories allude to the fact that it's not just the National Health Service that suffers from lack of investment in mental health and lack of provision in mental health. Research at Parliament Street last year showed that 6,000 children and adolescents were on a waiting list in June 2017 alone. We found that 160,000 people went to A&E in 2016-2017 alone just because of a mental health issue. And most shockingly, our most shocking research showed that the police were dealing with 295,000 mental health incidents just in 2017 alone, with the police dealing with 24,526 incidents a month. And just to put it into context, we've seen a rise in Hampshire, for example, from 9,000 mental health incidents the police are dealing with to nearly 37,000 incidents in 1 year alone. And to put it closer to home, we've seen a 61.9% rise in Durham Constabulary, right here, from 5,000 to nearly 15,000 incidents where mental health is a problem. And the police say the same thing. They say there's a lack of provision, and we are not trained to do this, but we have to pick up the pieces. And it's really hard to look at this without trying to be one-sided, but in our National Health Service, we have recommended the current government uses an invest to save model. We believe that if the government invests short term, and I'm actually going to give a figure, I'm not going to do a Diane Abbott, they'd have to invest at least £10 billion in mental health services alone. That's what they'd have to invest to actually truly solve the issue at the moment. £10 billion. But mental health cost the economy in 2015 alone £105.2 billion. And this was research done by Young Minds. To society in general, not just, when I say society, I'm not talking about the United Kingdom, I'm talking about everyone, 105.2 billion. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about huge figures. And this was generated from lost work days, productivity, welfare, the cost of prison services. So there's a lot of different areas. But actually by investing in early intervention, investing in prevention of mental health, it means that actually people can get help quicker. People are inevitably less likely to end up on welfare. They're also less likely to end up in prison. They're also less likely to not lose work days and cost business a lot of money. So interestingly, when I talk to Conservatives, obviously, as you can imagine, the idea of spending more money is not part of the Conservative ideology. But at this particular, if you think of this idea, it is very conservative, because we are talking about an economic argument in which actually people could be more productive, businesses could be more productive, less people on welfare means less cost on government. So it is a very, very conservative argument. And like I alluded to, if people get help fast, this doesn't just save money, but most importantly, it saves lives. You know, people will get the help they need, which means they won't need to go to the low points in which they find. And you know, you hear the idea of social mobility pushed around Parliament and different areas. And I was thinking of ways in which I could actually describe this. This is pure social mobility by investing in something that makes sense to every party across government. And I want to show you how, because I want to tell you my story. Because this is why I'm so passionate about this. This is very, very personal to me. Because I've seen what can happen when investment isn't in the NHS. And I can see what can happen when investment is available in the NHS and services are available. So at age 10, I was in the top set of my school. I literally, about 40 miles down the road there, I grew up. I was in the top set. I did loads of extracurricular activities. I played rugby. I had a good group of friends. And I got on well with my teachers. But unfortunately, I started at the age of 11 to develop a mental health disorder. I started to develop OCD. And I became withdrawn and scared and exhausted with this, as you would expect, an 11-year-old with all these this stuff going on in your head. You don't know what to do. And it really affected my schoolwork. Suddenly I was, having to miss lines because I felt that if I didn't miss a line, something bad would happen. And, teachers were saying to me, why are you missing lines, Daniel? 2 weeks ago you weren't doing this. And it didn't just happen overnight, but it started to get more intense. And I remember meeting with the pastoral care at the school. And that particular individual said, Daniel doesn't need to worry about anything. He just needs to work harder. Half of my staff have OCD. That was the approach from schools. Now, I don't hold a grudge. But what I would say is that exemplifies, what we're dealing with. And they found the solution. They were going to drop me from the top set to the bottom set because they thought that would lower my workload. They cancelled my extracurricular activities, including rugby, which I was obsessed with. And they let me leave class 5 minutes early because they thought that would cure some miraculous cures. It sounds like something from Freud. But unfortunately, it didn't improve it, and things got worse, and there was no provision in the NHS locally. And in my new school, I moved schools, and in my new school, the same situation happened again. Lack of awareness, lack of support, lack of understanding. And due to limited intervention and support, my mental health deteriorated further, which unfortunately led to me falling devastatingly behind in my class, and yet again withdrawing into myself. And I'd started as if one wasn't enough. I started to develop another mental health disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, closely linked to OCD. And this is when the sufferer becomes obsessed with their appearance and believes they look horrific. I thought I looked like an alien. I thought I'll explain that in a second. It's quite hard to explain, but you believe me, you know when you've got it. And without any support in school, my education standards dropped very quickly. And I started lagging behind my classmates. And my mental illness took over. So at the age of 16, I dropped out of school with not one qualification to my name. Dropped out of school with no qualification, and as you can imagine, that's not the best thing to do. And my opportunities seemed, everything seemed out of my reach at that particular juncture. But I slowly started to get back part of my life. But as you can imagine, as a 17, 18-year-old now, without any education, without any qualifications, I didn't really have many opportunities. So I worked unpaid internships, and I tried my best to maintain a somewhat positive life. I started campaigning I'm working hard on my mental health work, appearing on TV and radio, because I was put as the world's first selfie addict. I think, great title. Don't take selfies, guys, don't take selfies. But still, all of this meant nothing, nothing really matched what I wanted. And I wanted my education. I wanted to get back into school. And I really wanted to improve my life chances. But my campaign evidently went global. And as I described, the world's first selfie addict. And I got, it was great. It was fun in the way I got to get my message out there. I got to go to Europe and the United States and even China to talk about actually, my mental health. So that was useful in some ways. But I still couldn't get the support I needed. The NHS was still dearly behind, and eventually my parents got so desperate they actually paid for me to go down to London every single week to a national treatment centre at the Maudsley Hospital. And even then I had to wait 3 months for any support. But it gave me enough drive to actually get my education back. So number one, I got the support I needed. Within a couple of months, I believed I could get my education back. So that's within a couple of months. I took the risk and went to get my education back at a local college. And there was something different about this college. There was mental health support available at this college. Mental health support, which meant that in year one, at the old age of 20, in year one I completed my GCSEs. In year two I got my diploma. And by year three I was a university student at York. So, a mental health spokesperson at the time at Parliament Street, now Director of Mental Health, and I became Vice Chair of the National Eating Disorders Charity. So that just shows, and that was within 3.5 years. Bearing in mind I'd had my mental illness for 10 years. In 3.5 years, when the support was available, I started to get better. Now, the likelihood of a kid from Newcastle with no qualifications getting back into education, working for a political think tank, and becoming a vice chair of a national charity with mental health problems. I mean, it sounds a bit like a comedy sketch, really. And it seemed improbable. But the important thing is, I'm nothing special. I'm nothing special. It was the fact that I actually got the support I needed that meant I was able to achieve these things. Now there's thousands of young people across this country who are going through the same situation still. Same situation when I was 11, same situation when I was 15, and there'll be some that are going through the same situation now. And they might not be getting that support. Well, I know quite a lot of people aren't getting that support. And without any support, it can seem impossible to actually improve your situation. So my message to the Durham Union tonight is, firstly, thank you for coming with the snow. But secondly, please support this, because this is more important than you'd ever realise. Even if you're a Conservative or a Liberal or from Labour, and I'm starting to sound a bit like Barack Obama here, but get what I'm saying. Even if you're from either of them, this argument is purely stated within how you feel. Conservative, there's an economic argument. In Labour, there's the argument around social mobility, trying to improve people's standing. So wherever you come from on the political spectrum, this argument should ring true to you. And I ask you, the Durham Union, to support this argument. To support this argument because it's the right argument, it's the morally right argument, and actually I think it will help a lot of people and improve young people, especially's life chances for the better. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't drone on too much, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.